You changed the alarm code to my house? I asked, and my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "Someone responsible needs to be in charge now." I stood on my own front porch with a grocery bag pressed against my hip, staring at Brooke through the narrow opening of the door as if I had somehow arrived at the wrong address. I was 71 years old, but I knew exactly where I lived. George and I had bought that brick colonial outside Columbus, Ohio 32 years earlier. I knew which stairs squeaked in winter, which kitchen window stuck when the humidity rose, and which maple root had lifted the sidewalk by half an inch. I also knew the 4-digit alarm code I had entered almost every day for 11 years. I had typed it once. The keypad flashed red. I typed it again, slower this time. Red. That was when Brooke appeared behind the glass. She did not look surprised to see me standing there. That bothered me more than the locked door. "I changed it this morning," she said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. If you enjoy family betrayal stories, hidden wills, and mothers who finally receive justice, subscribe to EverNest Stories. More powerful stories are coming every day. Brooke was 39, polished in the way some people are polished when they want every decision to sound reasonable. Daniel agreed. Daniel was my only son. He and Brooke had been staying with me for 6 months, while they supposedly waited for renovations on their condo to be completed. The arrangement had started with 2 suitcases in the guest room. Somewhere along the way, their mail began arriving at my address. Brooke filled half my pantry with labeled containers, and Daniel started parking in George's old spot in the garage. I had noticed those things. I simply had not treated them as warnings. "Why would you change my code without asking me?" I said. Brooke opened the door another few inches but kept one hand on the edge of it. "Helen, this house needs one person managing things now. Daniel and I are trying to make everything easier for you." Easier. I looked past her toward the foyer. George's photograph was no longer on the small walnut table where I had kept it since his memorial service. In its place sat one of Brooke's white ceramic bowls. I wanted to ask where his picture had gone. I wanted to ask what exactly she thought she was managing. Instead, I shifted the grocery bag into my other hand. "I see," I said. Brooke seemed almost relieved. Maybe she expected an argument and had prepared herself to win it. Maybe my silence sounded like surrender. I walked back down the 3 porch steps, crossed the driveway, and placed the groceries on the passenger seat of my Buick. I had barely closed the driver's door when my phone began ringing. The number showed Bennett Home Security, the company George and I had used since we installed the system. I answered. "Mrs. Whitmore?" a man asked. "This is Grant Holloway with Account Security. I need to verify something with you personally." His tone was professional, but there was something underneath it that made me sit straighter. "Of course." Papers clicked softly in the background. "Did you authorize anyone today to change the primary administrator on your home security account?" I looked through my windshield toward the house. Brooke was still standing behind the front window. "No," I said. Grant paused. "Did you authorize anyone to remove your phone number as the primary emergency contact?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "No." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mrs. Whitmore, someone attempted both changes less than 20 minutes ago. The request was flagged because you are still the verified owner and primary account holder." I watched Brooke disappear from the window. Suddenly the red light on that keypad meant something very different. This was not about 4 numbers. Someone had tried to change who the system believed was in charge. "Mr. Holloway," I said quietly, "please don't approve anything." "I won't." I lowered my voice even though I was alone in the car. "And don't tell whoever called that you reached me first." For the next 3 days, I said nothing about Grant's call. I went inside through the garage after he temporarily restored my access, carried in the groceries, and behaved as though the entire incident had been nothing more than an inconvenience. Brooke watched me carefully from the kitchen island while I put milk in the refrigerator and placed a loaf of bread in the pantry. Daniel came home shortly after 6, loosened his tie, kissed Brooke on the cheek, and asked me how my afternoon had been. I told him it had been fine. That was all. Silence can make people comfortable when they believe it means agreement. Mine made Brooke careless. That evening, she moved George's photograph again. I found it on a shelf in the hallway beside a stack of unopened mail. I picked it up, wiped a thin line of dust from the frame, and returned it to the walnut table. Brooke noticed. She did not say anything, but her mouth tightened for half a second before she looked away. 6 months earlier, when Daniel first asked whether he and Brooke could stay with me during the renovation of their condominium, I had agreed without hesitation. 3 weeks, maybe 4, Daniel had promised. I prepared the guest room, cleared space in the hall closet, and even bought Brooke the hazelnut coffee she liked. First, they behaved like guests. They asked before using the washer. They replaced groceries. Brooke thanked me whenever I cooked dinner. Then the questions slowly disappeared. Their shoes stayed by the front door. Their packages arrived daily. Daniel moved a second television into the den. Brooke replaced the hand towels in my downstairs bathroom because, as she put it, the old ones made the room look dated. None of those things seemed important enough to argue about. I had spent most of my life choosing peace over small disagreements. George used to tease me about it. "Helen," he once said, "you can make room for everybody, but make sure they remember it is your room to make." I had laughed then. I remembered those words now. On Thursday morning, I was making oatmeal when Brooke walked into the kitchen with her phone in one hand and a folder in the other. "I was thinking we should organize the household accounts," she said. She sat across from me without waiting to be invited. Utilities, insurance, emergency contacts, that kind of thing. It would be easier if everything went through one email address. I stirred cinnamon into my bowl. "Whose email address?" "Ours," she said, then corrected herself. "Daniel's and mine. Just so nothing gets missed." I looked at the folder. My electric company logo was visible through the clear plastic cover. "Where did you get that?" Brooke smiled. "It was on the counter." It had not been on the counter. I kept household statements in the bottom drawer of George's old desk. "I can manage my bills," I said. Her smile remained, but her eyes changed. "Nobody is saying you cannot. We are trying to make things easier." There was that word again. Easier. By Friday, I started noticing how often Brooke used it, whenever she wanted control of something that belonged to me. Easier to change the alarm. Easier to handle the mail. Easier to manage the bills. Easier if Daniel kept the spare garage remote. Easier if she answered calls from service companies. That afternoon, while Brooke was out, I opened George's desk and checked the bottom drawer. The utility statements were there, but several folders had been moved. The property tax file sat crooked. The homeowner's insurance folder was upside down. My copy of the security contract was missing. I closed the drawer and stood there with my hand resting on the brass handle. For the first time, I stopped asking myself whether Brooke was simply being helpful. I began asking a different question. How much had she already touched before I started paying attention? The missing security contract bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I knew exactly where I had kept it because George had been particular about paperwork. Every important document had a place, and every place had a reason. The security agreement belonged in a blue folder behind the homeowner's insurance policy. I checked the drawer twice. Then I checked the filing cabinet in the den. Nothing. I did not ask Brooke. Instead, I called Grant the next morning from the parking lot of a small coffee shop about 2 miles from home. I chose a table near the window, set my purse beside me, and kept my voice low. "I need to understand exactly what was requested on my account," I said. Grant did not rush his answer. He told me the request had included more than a new code. Someone had tried to change the primary contact, replace the billing email, add Daniel and Brooke as administrators, and move me to a secondary access level. I stared at the steam rising from my coffee. What information did they use? I asked. "Enough to pass the first layer," he said. "Your address, account number, and some personal verification details." The system stopped the request because the final authorization did not match your original account profile. I looked through the window at cars moving along the wet pavement. Those details were not random. They came from inside my house. Was the request made online? "Partly," Grant said. "Then someone called to finish it." "Who?" There was a pause. "A woman identified herself as a family member, assisting you with household management." He did not have to say Brooke's name. I already knew. I thanked him and asked for one thing. "Do not contact anyone else in the house unless I approve it first." "Understood." Before we ended the call, Grant added, "Mrs. Whitmore, I would also suggest changing your account password and recovery email. That sentence stayed with me all the way home. When I walked inside, Brooke was at the dining table with her laptop open. Daniel was beside her, scrolling through his phone. They both looked up at the same time. "Where were you?" Brooke asked. The question was casual, but it landed strangely. "Coffee," I said. Daniel smiled. "You could have made some here." I hung my coat in the hall closet. I wanted to get out. Brooke nodded, but her eyes followed me toward the stairs. That evening I checked my email account. My password still worked, but the recovery phone number had been changed to one I did not recognize. I sat very still. I did not click anything for several seconds. Then I reset the password, restored my own number, and signed out every other device. A list of recent login locations appeared on the screen. Most were mine. One was not. It showed a login from a device connected to my home wireless network 2 nights earlier, shortly after midnight. I wrote down the time. I wrote down the device description. I wrote down everything. On Saturday morning, Brooke came into the kitchen wearing a cream sweater and carrying a basket of folded towels. She looked relaxed. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we should start putting all the house information in one place. It would save you from having to remember so much." I buttered a piece of toast. "What sort of information?" "Passwords, account numbers, insurance, property records, just practical things." She said it with the same gentle tone people use when discussing weather. I looked at her for a moment. "That sounds like a lot. It is better to organize before there is a problem." I took a sip of coffee. "What problem are you expecting?" Brooke stopped folding the towel in her hands. Only for a second. "No problem," she said. "I am just thinking ahead." She smiled again and walked away. I watched her leave the kitchen. For weeks I had wondered whether I was imagining the pattern. By then I was no longer wondering. I just did not know yet how far ahead Brooke had been thinking. By Sunday afternoon, I had decided that knowing Brooke was trying to take control was not enough. I needed to know what she believed she had already accomplished. So I did something that felt unnatural to me. I acted as if nothing had changed. I folded laundry. I watered the fern in the front room. I made chicken soup and left it simmering on the stove. When Brooke asked whether I wanted help paying the electric bill, I told her I would think about it. When Daniel asked if I had fixed the alarm problem, I simply said the company was looking into it. Neither of them pressed me. That told me something too. They were waiting. At dinner that night, Brooke served herself before I sat down, something she had never done during the first few months she lived with me. Daniel barely looked up from his plate. I watched them in silence while the kitchen clock clicked above the doorway. Brooke finally smiled. "I think we are making progress," she said. I set down my fork. "With what?" She glanced at Daniel before answering. It was a small movement, but I noticed it. "Just getting everything organized. The house, the bills, your appointments, all of it." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, Brooke has been handling a lot lately. She is good at this kind of thing." I looked at him. "What kind of thing?" He hesitated. "Planning, keeping track of things." Brooke leaned back in her chair. "Helen, nobody is trying to take anything away from you. We just think it would be easier if you did not have to manage every detail by yourself." I heard the word again. Easier. I had started to understand that whenever Brooke used that word, she meant fewer decisions for me and more decisions for her. "I have managed this house for 32 years, I said. My voice was calm. "I know," she replied. "But things change." I looked around the kitchen. George and I had chosen the oak cabinets together. I had painted the walls twice, replaced the flooring once, and argued with him for 3 weeks about whether we needed a larger refrigerator. Every corner of that room carried a memory. Brooke spoke as if time alone had transferred authority from my hands into hers. "What exactly needs changing?" I asked. She smiled, encouraged by the question. "We should consolidate the household accounts. Put Daniel on the utility records. Update the emergency contacts. Maybe have the property documents copied so we know where everything is. Eventually, it would make sense for one of us to handle communication with the insurance company too." Daniel finally looked at me. "It is practical, Mom. Practical." Another harmless word carrying more weight than it should. I lifted my water glass and took a slow drink. And who would be that one person? Brooke answered before Daniel could. Probably me. I am already doing most of it. There it was. Not hidden. Not softened. She said it as if the decision had already been made and only the paperwork was unfinished. I nodded once. I understand. Brooke relaxed. Daniel did too. They thought I had accepted the arrangement. After dinner, I carried my plate to the sink and heard Brooke whisper something to Daniel behind me. I could not make out every word, but I heard one sentence clearly. Once everything is organized, she will see it is better this way. I kept rinsing the plate. I did not turn around. I did not ask what she meant. The next morning I opened a fresh notebook and wrote down every account Brooke had mentioned. Utilities, insurance, emergency contacts, property records. Then I added the alarm company and my email account. I stared at the list for a long moment. Brooke believed she was organizing my life. I was beginning to see that she was mapping it. The notebook stayed in my purse the next morning when I drove downtown to the bank George and I had used for more than 20 years. I had not visited our safe deposit box since the spring after he died. There had been no reason to. The documents inside were not things I needed for ordinary life, and opening that box always made his absence feel new again. Still, one sentence from George had been following me for days. He had said it during our last year together. After a neighbor signed financial papers she did not fully understand because her son told her it was easier that way. Helen, never let convenience become control. At the time I thought he was simply being cautious. Sitting across from the bank employee that morning, I understood why he had remembered that lesson so clearly. After my identification was verified, she led me through the quiet hallway and brought the metal box to a private room. I closed the door and sat down. For a moment I only looked at it. George had placed a strip of masking tape beneath the lid years ago and written our last name in his neat block letters. Whitmore. The ink had faded slightly, but seeing his handwriting stopped me. I rested my fingertips against the tape, then opened the box. There were no surprises in the dramatic sense. No hidden fortune. No secret account. George had been too practical for that. Instead, there were the things that mattered when someone tried to tell you that you no longer understood your own life. The original deed to the house. Copies of the homeowner's insurance policy. Property tax records. The first security agreement we had signed when the system was installed. Estate documents. A list of account numbers in George's handwriting. Beneath them sat a sealed envelope with my name on it. I knew the envelope immediately. George had shown it to me once and told me not to open it unless I ever felt uncertain about something important. I had almost forgotten it existed. I opened it slowly. The letter was only 2 pages long. George wrote about the house, our savings, and the decisions we had made together. He reminded me that the home belonged to me after his death, and that no family member had authority over it simply because they expected to inherit someday. Then I reached a sentence that made me stop reading. He had written that love and help were not the same as surrendering control, and that growing older did not erase a person's right to make decisions. I read that sentence twice, then a third time. I did not cry. I folded the paper carefully and placed it beside the deed. For several weeks, Brooke had made me feel as though protecting my independence might be unreasonable. She had wrapped every request in soft language. Organization, safety, practicality, help. Yet every document in front of me told a simpler story. My name was on the deed. My name was on the insurance. My name was on the security contract. George had not left me confusion. He had left me clarity. I took photographs of each document with my phone, then asked the bank employee to make certified copies of the deed and the most important estate pages. I placed the originals back in the box. The copies went into a plain envelope inside my purse. Before leaving, I sat in my car for several minutes with George's letter beside me. I had gone to the bank hoping to find reassurance. What I found was something stronger. Brooke had been acting as though age had created an empty space around me that she was entitled to fill. George had prepared for the possibility that someone might someday confuse assistance with authority. I started the car and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time since the alarm code changed, I was not wondering what Brooke would do next. I was thinking about what I would allow her to do next. I returned home just before noon with the certified copies tucked inside my purse and George's letter resting in a separate envelope beneath them. Brooke was in the kitchen arranging groceries on the counter. She glanced at my purse before she looked at me. "Busy morning?" she asked. "A few errands," I said. I hung my coat, carried a small bag of apples to the refrigerator, and did not mention the bank. If Brooke wanted to believe I was still unaware of what she had been doing, I was willing to let her. Over the next several days I changed nothing about my routine. I made coffee at 7. I walked around the neighborhood when the weather was clear. I watched the evening news. I paid my own bills. I kept the notebook hidden in the locked compartment of my car, along with copies of the documents from the bank. First, writing things down felt excessive. Then I noticed how quickly small events became difficult to remember in order. Tuesday, Brooke asked for the homeowner's insurance login. Wednesday, Daniel suggested adding his name to the electric account, just in case. Thursday morning, I found a printed form beside the computer asking for updated emergency contact information. My name was already filled in. So was Brooke's. Under relationship, she had written household manager. I folded the paper once and slipped it into my purse. That afternoon, I heard Brooke talking on the phone in the den. I had come downstairs quietly because I wanted another cup of tea. Her voice carried through the half-open door. "No, she has not agreed to anything yet," she said. I stopped near the bottom stair. There was a pause. Brooke lowered her voice, but I could still hear her. "She keeps saying she can handle things. Daniel needs to be patient." Another pause. "Once she agrees she cannot manage it, Daniel can handle the rest." I stood there with one hand resting on the banister. I did not know who was on the other end of the call. I did not know what Brooke meant by the rest. I refused to invent an answer. Guessing would only make me emotional, and emotion was exactly what I did not need. I walked back upstairs without making a sound. 10 minutes later, I opened the notes application on my phone and recorded the date, the time, and the exact words I remembered. I did not add an interpretation, only the facts. That became my rule. Facts first, feelings later. By Friday I had a list. A changed alarm account. Changed email recovery number. Missing paperwork. Requests for passwords. Questions about insurance. Suggestions about utilities. A form identifying Brooke as household manager. None of those things alone proved what she intended. Together, they told me I needed to stop treating her actions as isolated favors. That evening, Daniel found me at the dining table sorting mail. "Mom, Brooke thinks you are making things harder than they need to be," he said. I looked up. "How?" "You are holding on to every little detail. Bills, accounts, service calls. You do not have to do all of that anymore." I placed one envelope on top of another. "I know I do not have to." He looked relieved until I continued. "I choose to." His expression changed. "That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He rubbed his hand across the back of his neck. "We are trying to plan ahead." There were those words again. Plan ahead. I had heard Brooke say almost the same thing. I smiled faintly and returned to the mail. Then plan carefully. Daniel stared at me for a moment before leaving the room. Later that night, I added his words to the notebook too. I was no longer trying to catch anyone in a lie. I was simply keeping a record of what they were willing to say when they thought I was not paying attention. Grant called me again the following Monday morning, while I was sitting in my car outside the pharmacy. I almost let it go to voicemail, then saw the company name and answered. "Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to speak with you before we respond to another account request," he said. His voice was measured, but I had learned enough by then to recognize what that tone meant. "What kind of request?" I asked. Someone tried to update the authorization hierarchy again. This time, they requested permanent administrative access for Daniel Whitmore and Brooke Whitmore. I looked across the parking lot at a woman loading groceries into the trunk of her car. Ordinary people were moving through an ordinary morning, while someone inside my family kept trying to rewrite the rules of my home. "Was anything approved?" I asked. "No. Your account now requires direct verification with you for all major changes." I let out a slow breath. "Did they give a reason?" Grant paused. "They said they were preparing for future household management." There were those words again. Future management. language that sounded responsible until you noticed who was being managed. I thanked him and asked him to document the request. He told me he already had. On the drive home, I did not feel angry. I felt clear. Brooke had continued because she believed my silence meant she had more time. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel was standing near the garage with his phone in his hand. He came toward me before I had even turned off the engine. "Mom, what did you do with the security account?" he asked. I stepped out slowly and closed the car door. "What do you mean?" "The company is suddenly making everything difficult. Brooke tried to update a few things and they would not let her." I studied his face. There was frustration there but no confusion. That difference mattered. "Why was Brooke updating my account?" I asked. Daniel looked toward the house. "We already talked about this. We are trying to make things easier. Did you know she changed my code?" He did not answer. Not immediately. His eyes dropped to the driveway, then shifted toward the garage. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. It was enough. "Daniel," I said. "Did you know?" He exhaled through his nose. I knew she was going to make some changes. The sentence was quieter than I expected. I felt something inside me settle. Not break. Settle. "Before she did it?" I asked. He rubbed his jaw. "Mom, it was not meant to upset you." I nodded. That was not my question. He looked at me then. "Yes." The word was almost a whisper. For days I had focused on Brooke because she was the one asking for passwords, moving documents, changing contacts, and speaking as if my life were a project waiting for her approval. Daniel had remained in the background, softening her words, calling everything practical. Now I understood that his silence had not been passive. He had known. "Why did you not tell me?" I asked. "Because you would have said no." I held his gaze. There it was. The cleanest answer he could have given me. Not because I was confused. Not because I had forgotten. Not because there had been an emergency. They had avoided asking because they already knew my answer. Daniel seemed to hear what he had admitted because his expression changed. "That came out wrong," he said. "No," I replied. "I think it came out exactly right." I walked past him toward the house. Behind me, he said, "Mom, Brooke is only trying to help." I stopped with my hand on the garage door handle. "Help requires permission, Daniel." He said nothing. I went inside, placed my purse on the kitchen chair, and opened my notebook. I wrote down Grant's call. I wrote down the attempted authorization change. Then I wrote one final line beneath Daniel's name. He knew before she changed the code. By Wednesday evening, I was ready to stop collecting pieces and let Daniel and Brooke show me the picture themselves. I asked them both to sit with me in the living room after dinner. Brooke arrived first, carrying her usual calm expression. Daniel came in a minute later and sat at the far end of the sofa. I chose George's old chair. The folder from the bank rested on the coffee table between us. I did not open it. "Not yet. I think we need to talk about how things are being handled in this house," I said. Brooke nodded immediately, almost too quickly. "I agree. That is exactly what I have been trying to say." Daniel looked at her, then at me. I folded my hands in my lap. "Go ahead." Brooke seemed surprised by the invitation, but she recovered fast. "Helen, this is not about taking anything from you. It is about being realistic. You are 71. There is a lot to manage. The house, the bills, service appointments, insurance, security. We are trying to make sure nothing falls through the cracks." I let her continue. "You have had a lot of responsibility for a long time," she said. "There is no shame in letting someone younger handle some of it." Daniel added quietly, "Mom, nobody thinks you cannot make decisions." I looked at him. "Then why did you make one for me?" His eyes dropped. Brooke answered instead. "The alarm change was practical. We live here too. Someone needs to be in charge of the system." "Someone," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "One person. Otherwise it gets confusing." "And that person should be you?" Brooke paused, then gave a small shrug. "I am already handling most of the household organization." I nodded as if she had confirmed something simple. "What else should you be in charge of?" She glanced at Daniel. "Insurance contacts. Utilities. Emergency information. Maybe property paperwork. Just so everything is accessible." Anything else? I asked. Her confidence returned. Eventually, it would make sense for Daniel to have more authority too. He is your son. He is going to be responsible for this place someday. The room became very quiet. I looked at Daniel. He did not correct her. He did not say someday was not today. That silence told me more than an argument ever could. Brooke leaned forward slightly. We are family, Helen. We are trying to plan for the future. I rested my hand on the folder. You are right about one thing. Brooke's face softened. Someone does need to be in charge. I opened the folder. The first document I placed on the table was the security agreement. Then the deed. Then the homeowner's insurance policy. Then the property tax record. I laid them out slowly, one beside the other. Brooke's expression changed with each page. The security company already knows who is in charge, I said. I tapped the first document. So does the county. I tapped the deed. So does the insurance company. So does the tax office. Daniel shifted forward. Mom, nobody is disputing that the house is yours. I looked at him. Then why did Brooke try to remove me as the primary account holder? His face went still. Brooke answered carefully. That was not what happened. I reached into the folder and placed Grant's written account summary on top. It is exactly what happened. Brooke stared at the paper but did not touch it. I continued. You tried to change the billing email, emergency contact, and administrative access. You asked for passwords. You moved my documents. You changed my email recovery number. You filled out a form calling yourself household manager. Brooke's mouth opened, but I raised one hand. Not sharply. Just enough. You have spoken for several weeks. I listened. She leaned back. We were helping. No, I said. You were deciding. Daniel rubbed his palms together. Mom, this has gotten out of proportion. I turned toward him. You told me you knew she was changing the code because you knew I would say no. He said nothing. I looked at both of them. A no does not become a yes because you avoid asking. Help does not become authority because you call it practical. And living in my home does not make you its owner. Brooke looked down at the documents spread across the table. For the first time since this began, she had nothing organized to say. Brooke was the first to speak. So what happens now? She asked. Her voice had lost the polished certainty I had heard for weeks. I gathered the documents into a neat stack before answering. Now we put things back where they belong. Daniel looked at me carefully. What does that mean? I turned toward him. It means the household accounts stay in my name. The insurance contacts stay under my control. The security company speaks to me. My email belongs to me. My documents stay where I put them. And neither of you makes another decision about this house without asking first. Brooke crossed her arms. You are treating us like strangers. I shook my head. No. I am treating you like adults who crossed a boundary. Daniel leaned forward. Mom, we can fix this. We do not need to make it bigger. I looked at him for a long moment. You are right. We do not. Then I told them they needed to find another place to live. I did not say it loudly. I did not need to. Brooke stared at me as if I had suddenly changed the rules, though the truth was that I was finally enforcing the ones that had always existed. You are asking your own son to leave, she said. I am asking two capable adults to move out of a house they were supposed to stay in for a few weeks. Daniel looked down at the floor. How much time? I had already thought about that. 30 days. Brooke stood up. That is not reasonable. It is reasonable, I said. And it is final. She looked at Daniel, waiting for him to challenge me. He did not. Maybe he understood. There was nothing left to argue about. The next morning, I called Grant and asked him to remove every secondary administrator from the account. Daniel and Brooke could still enter the house during the 30 days they were living there, but only as temporary users. No account changes. No billing access. No authority. Grant confirmed each change slowly, and I wrote everything down. I also contacted the electric company, the insurance office, and my internet provider. I updated passwords. I restored my own recovery information. I placed the important papers back in the safe deposit box and kept certified copies in a locked file cabinet. None of it felt dramatic. That was what surprised me most. Taking back control did not feel like revenge. It felt like cleaning a room after too much clutter had collected. Over the next month, the house changed again. Cardboard boxes appeared in the hallway. Brooke stopped replacing things without asking. Daniel became quieter. One evening, he stood beside me at the kitchen counter while I sliced apples. "I should have told you," he said. I kept cutting. "Yes." He waited for more. I did not give him an easy answer. Finally, he said, "I think I convinced myself we were helping because that sounded better than admitting we wanted control." I set the knife down. Knowing that matters. What you do with it matters more. He nodded. On the last Saturday, Daniel carried the final box to their car. Brooke walked out without saying much. Before she left, she glanced at the security keypad by the garage door. I noticed, but I said nothing. After their car disappeared down the street, I stood in the quiet entryway for a while. That afternoon, Grant helped me create a new personal access code. I chose 4 numbers that meant something only to George and me. When I entered them that evening, the keypad turned green. The lock released. I stepped inside and looked at George's photograph back on the walnut table where it belonged. Brooke had believed 4 numbers could decide who had authority in my home. I had learned something different. A boundary does not protect you because other people respect it. Protects you when you are finally willing to enforce it. Subscribe to EverNest Stories for more emotional family betrayal stories, inheritance secrets, and mother's justice. And watch the next story on screen now.